I swear, they really just cannot get Storm right in these movies. Hashtag justice for Storm. So X-Men Dark Phoenix Saga is perhaps the final installment of Fox Studios' X-Men universe. And the reason I say perhaps is because we don't know what they're going to do or not do with the New Mutants movie. And this is Fox's second attempt of recreating the very beloved comic book storyline of the Phoenix Saga. And most people did not enjoy their first attempt of X-Men The Last Stand. And instead of learning from their mistake the first go round, they decided to give us another Phoenix-based movie that we didn't even ask for. And so you have X-Men Dark Phoenix. And I gotta say that it wasn't the dumpster fire I was expecting it to be. So the storyline for this movie is some astronauts experience some trouble in space, and so the X-Men go up there to rescue them. And unfortunately, no good deed goes unpunished. And while at the end of the rescue, basically Jean Grey ends up being bombarded with a cosmic level fart cloud, and it ends up increasing her mutant power tenfold, and all that uncontrollable power causes her to go dark. And I don't know what it is about Fox Studios making these cosmic level entities from the comics into giant fart clouds. Like, they did the same thing in the Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer. Like, this is what Galactus is supposed to look like in the comics, and this is what they made Galactus look like in the movie. Now, this is what the Phoenix Force is supposed to look like in the comics, and this is what they decided to make the Phoenix Force look like in the movie. Yeah, fart cloud obsession. I don't get it. Like, this movie isn't the smelly, gooey trash that I thought it was going to be. Like, the makeup on Beast and Nightcrawler looked great. The effects on Jean Grey's Phoenix when her eyes would go fiery and the little fire veins would crop up on her body looked great. Of course, you got the terrible looking makeup job of Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique, but I'll get to that later. It's getting to see Nightcrawler cut loose reminded me of that first scene in X2. Like, that was great. And then also on top of that, you got to see Storm cut loose way more than she has in any other movie in the past. And so all of that was fun to watch. Plus, I feel like the actors in this movie really brought their A game. Even Jennifer Lawrence. Now, granted, I was never a big fan of Jennifer Lawrence's version of Mystique. And as I mentioned before, the makeup on Beast and Nightcrawler looked great, but the makeup on Mystique looked terrible. And part of that is because Jennifer Lawrence has made it very public that she does not like sitting in the makeup chair for Mystique. So if you compare how Mystique looked in X-Men First Class to how she looks now, it's definitely a downgrade. However, with that said, I didn't really have that much of a problem of her performance in this movie. Now, granted, she didn't really do much, but the little that she did, I didn't have a problem with. Like, definitely the performances to watch in this movie was Sophie Turner as Jean Grey. I thought she was great. Like, I believed why she made her slow descent into madness way more than I believed Daenerys from Game of Thrones. And honestly, I was like, if Sophie Turner had this Dark Phoenix power in Game of Thrones and she went crazy like that, it probably made season 8 of Game of Thrones even better. But of course, the performance to watch for this movie goes to James McAvoy's Charles Xavier. The relationship and chemistry that he has with Michael Fassbender, like, they are Magneto and Charles Xavier. I'm all about shipping those two together, and so is the rest of the internet. With that said though, the biggest problem with this movie, and a problem that Fox just doesn't seem to understand, is the thing that made the Phoenix Saga and the Dark Phoenix Saga so popular was the fact that A, you got to see the Phoenix Saga first before you jumped into the Dark Phoenix Saga, and most importantly, B, the Phoenix Saga came out in the 80s, so that means you had years of X-Men storylines where you got to know Jean Grey, you got to know Beast, you got to know Cyclops, and all the other X-Men characters, so that when Jean Grey got the Phoenix power and experienced this power boost, it mattered. When Jean Grey eventually went dark, it mattered. However, for this movie, in this world, we just met this version of Jean Grey. We just met this version of Cyclops. We just met this version of Nightcrawler. We just met this version of Storm, and we only just met them in X-Men Apocalypse. And on top of that, it was in a movie that wasn't that good. So I don't know who these characters are to really be that invested in them. Really, I'm only watching to see how it affects Xavier, to see how it affects Magneto, to see how it affects Beast, because we spent way more time with those characters than these new incarnation of X-Men. Now, granted, X-Men Last Stand was a terrible movie, but the one thing that I can say that that movie has on this movie, and it's like, wow, I'm actually giving some type of props to X-Men Last Stand. Whoa. But it's like, that movie had way more emotional investment to the characters because you spent time with Jean Grey, you spent time with Wolverine, you spent time with Cyclops, you spent time with all of these characters, so that when everything happened, it mattered. But with this movie, you just don't care. Now granted, that's not to say X-Men Last Stand was a great movie, because it wasn't. But if you had to compare this one to Last Stand, like, this movie is not as good as X-Men Last Stand. And that's a shame. But that's like if, say, the MCU decided after 3 movies to jump and to do Infinity War and Endgame. And doing something like that doesn't work. What made Infinity War and Endgame so epic were the years that you spent in the MCU, the time that you spent with the characters within the MCU, so that when you got to a huge culmination of the Infinity Gauntlet storyline, all of the backstory that you experienced throughout the 10 plus years of these movies, it mattered. And a story as grand scale as the Phoenix Saga should have been treated the same way. And I mean, continuing with investment in the characters, it seems like the X-Men universe doesn't know how to focus on anybody else but Charles Xavier, Magneto, Jean Grey, and Wolverine especially, because you got a character as iconic as Cyclops, and he had no character in this movie. He was chasing after Jean Grey the whole movie. But I'm like, who is he as a person? You don't get to see the level of strategic mind that Cyclops has. You don't get to see the leadership skills that Cyclops has. And it's the same thing with Storm. For pretty much all of these movies, Storm is just there. And Storm is one of the most iconic characters in X-Men. She's been the leader of the X-Men almost as long as Cyclops has been. And in this movie, she barely has that much dialogue. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, she has a cool fight scene in the movie, but that's really it. And then on top of that, they don't even really utilize her powers to the fullest extent. She's just there to throw lightning throughout the movie. Like, she doesn't summon one tornado. Again, justice for Storm. Also, speaking of another character that hardly does anything, like I mentioned, Magneto and Charles Xavier are basically the relationship that made these new incarnation of movies interesting. They barely even know what to do with Magneto. Like, he has the same storyline that he had in X-Men Apocalypse. He goes away, he finds peace, something brings him back, he starts murdering again. Same thing happened in this movie. He goes away, he finds peace, something brings him back, which is the downfall of Jean Grey, and he starts murdering again. It's almost like the writers have no idea how to write X-Men characters, with the exception of maybe Wolverine. Go figure. But yeah, like I said, even though I wanted more for this movie, I didn't hate it. Like, it was to the point that I was surprised how much I did not hate this movie. I was like, is something wrong with me? Like, am I trash? Like, do I need to go to a doctor? Like, why did I hate this movie? And I'm like, I was sitting in the theater, I was like, honestly, I like this movie a little bit more than I liked X-Men Apocalypse. And that's saying something. However, don't take that as any high praise for this movie, because I went into this movie with super low expectations. So because of that, I'm assuming that's what made my enjoyment of this movie a little bit better. So the moral of the story is, go into this movie with super low expectations and probably have a couple glasses of wine, and you might not have that bad a time with this movie. But yeah, overall, my rating for X-Men Dark Phoenix, I would say it barely broke even. I just can't wait to see what Marvel Studios does with the X-Men properties going forward. And hopefully, they stay far away from the Phoenix storyline for a very long time. You would think that the X-Men have no other storylines in the comics but the Phoenix Saga, considering how many times they do it. Anyway, so did you see X-Men Dark Phoenix? What did you think about it? Also, going forward, what storyline would you like to see Marvel Studios adapt once they do finally recreate the X-Men movies? Let me know down in the comment section below. Also, while you're at it, please hit that thumbs up button and give this video a like. It'll really help out the channel. And while you're at it, please check out the other videos in my channel. And if you like what you see, please subscribe for more. And please share my videos with your friends, families, and neighbors to help me continue to grow. Also, please check out the description box below. I'll give my Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, so please follow me on there. And as always, I'll catch you guys next time. Happy Pride Month!